What's up, Brandon? How you doing?
Good, Pete. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. My 5-year-old dragged some sort of like fun virus home, and so I'm kind of
Yeah.
like a little on the struggle bus right now, but I'm maintaining. I'm maintaining. Um, so while folks are joining us here, just we can let some folks kind of trickle in here. Any big plans this weekend? You gonna be coaching at all? What's the deal?
Yeah. So I will be doing a little bit of coaching. I have 5 kids, so the germs are always coming home.
Dude,
Fortunately,
you're just like Iron Man.
yes, dude. So my immune system is really strong.
Yeah, it has
But
to be.
yeah, and fortunately for me, I'm feeling really healthy right now. But one of the kids was down with the flu recently, but he's on the mend. I will be doing some coaching.
Nice.
I try to coach my kids in baseball as long as they'll be responsive.
Yeah,
Um, and that varies by kid. For one of the kids, it was like by 7, I couldn't tell him anything.
it's like
But
nah.
my oldest, he's 13 now, and he still listens to me and he's very respectful. And yeah, I'll be helping coach his team this weekend as they enter a tournament here in
I
Austin.
love I love it. I love it. This is winter ball. So these guys are like
Yeah,
it's like
well, it's Texas, so there's just baseball year round.
really? Oh, okay.
Pretty
Got it.
much.
It's like that is like that's for like serious folks. Awesome. Well, I think we got some folks here now. We can get this party started. So hey everyone, thank you for joining Power Hour. I'm Pete Kazanji. So while everyone's getting situated here, we'd love everyone to take a few moments to get familiar with the Zoom webinar interface. So the whole idea here for this event is audience participation. So please do use the chat panel, leverage the Q&A panel, so on. We've got the illustrious Brandon here to answer questions, and I'll try to do my best job at it. But we are here at your disposal. We have a bunch of questions that were submitted ahead of time as well. Please do let us know where you're calling in from in the chat. And so for folks who are not familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related disciplines. And our community's mission is to create an environment for our 30,000 and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own, help them see around corners they may not know about, just get better in general. And so the way that we do that is through great live sessions like this, our robust online forum, and in-person events. And so for folks who weren't previously admitted, you should have access to the community now. So before we get started, a couple of reminders: Power Hour's unique format. We're not really going through a specific piece of content. Rather, we're picking the brain of whoever our illustrious guest is today. So that happens to be Brandon. So you're here to learn. So please do use those Q&A. We'll do our best to answer those things. So with that, let's go ahead and head into some introductions. I'll make mine pretty quick. I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales organizations, sales managers, leaders use metrics to improve the performance of their team. I'm also the founder of Modern Sales Pros, and prior to this, I started and sold a recruiting software company called Talent Bin. So that's a little bit on me, but more importantly, we've got Brandon here today, who obviously is a father 5 times over and a baseball coach, but does a couple sales leadership things on the side, from his full. Yeah, from his full-time job of being a dad. Brandon, maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about what you work on there at Qualia, and some of the sales leadership roles that you've had before, just so people can kind of get a sense of the type of sales motions you've worked on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pete, and pleasure to be here with all of you today.
Oh yeah.
Currently running sales for Qualia. For those aren't familiar with the company, we're Series D SaaS startup. Will do 100 million in ARR by the end of the year. So pretty large business at this point. Wasn't so large.
Damn, dog.
I know, man. Wasn't that large when I joined 4 years ago. So we've done a lot of work that I'm very proud of. The company is a vertical SaaS play. We sell into the real estate category, and we start with title companies. So we sell to title companies, we sell to lenders, and we sell to some of the other verticals within real estate. And these are infrastructure solutions that make it easier for people in this country to buy and sell homes. Before that, I was running sales at a company called Turnkey, which was later acquired by Vacasa. I was running sales and operations, so I had about 250 people on the team. About 100 of those people were in some kind of sales role. Worked with some amazing people. Prior to that, I was working at MongoDB, where I learned from the great Carlos Del Torre, who was our CRO.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was a fun experience. And then prior to that, as you can see here from the logo, I was at Upwork running sales, which if we have any entrepreneurs on the phone or on the call here, you probably used Upwork. It's the world's
We
largest.
use the hell out of Upwork right now, man. We use it for pipe gen. Are you kidding me? We have so many. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have so many offshore like folks doing contact cleaning and development for, from our outbound. Oh my gosh, the amount of like revenue I've put through Upwork on like all my startups is like absolutely bananas.
I love it. I love it. So those are just some of my experiences. But I've been in sales for 18 years now. I've been in sales leadership for like 14 of those years, and just pumped to be here with Pete.
I love it, man. That's crazy. And also like, yeah, MongoDB was Pipe Gen Tuesday. Was it Pipe Gen Monday or Wednesday or Tuesday?
Yeah, it was
PG.
It was PG Tuesday. They changed
PG
the day all the time. Yeah, PG Tuesday when I was there. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, you gotta feed the pipe. Awesome. All right, well, we can get started here. Yeah, that's the way that you described Qualia as kind of like plumbing. It just like it made me think of one of Atrium's customers, a company called Built. They do about like they kind of do a similar thing for construction companies, because like construction from like a lean management and like the finance stuff, like all this stuff is just like all this like terrible mess of like different vendors and like, you know, I can't get this deposit from the bank until like this has shown up and this and this and this and this, and it's all like done by like fax and PDF and so on and so forth. And there's like, the more and more, it seems like there's probably a lot of companies that are helping to like merge these sort of like old school workflows that have historically happened via PDF and fax together, especially like when you have more and more kind of stakeholders. I imagine that one of the things that ends up being challenging there, though, especially like, gosh, if compared to like selling to MongoDB, right, where you're selling to like, you know, a VPE or like a CTO or an engineer or whatever, it's like you're selling to like pretty non-technical audiences. How does that kind of change the way that you manage your team, enable your team, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, the two you described there are very drastically different sales motions, right? You're selling to most of the time like a business owner who is like a tech laggard. There's not a technical persona. They're not very familiar with like modern technology in general in some cases. And then if you're selling into IT, it's the exact opposite. You're dealing with a well-educated, well-informed buyer that's coming in like way down here in the buyer funnel.
Right.
In many cases, when you're selling to IT on the infrastructure side, like selling a database software like MongoDB, the buyer in many cases knows more about the tech than the salesperson does. So it's more about helping them put a go, no-go process in place and being a guide or a shepherd than it is about like actually convincing them that the product is going to be valuable. When you're selling vertical SaaS, and that's what Qualia is. Built is another example, a great business, by the way. Some of the bigger vertical SaaS companies that folks might be familiar with as well are like Procore, selling to contractors and construction companies. Service Titan, selling to like field professionals. They're probably the largest vertical SaaS company. And then there's Qualia. And so with vertical SaaS, you're trying to do like on the business side of things, just for some like inside baseball. When you're trying to win the category, like we're trying to win the real estate category, you want to establish a control point. So like our control point is we're providing all the back office software for a title company, which is one of the verticals within real estate. So it's like the last thing that company rips out before they go into business. So they're never going to cancel. So the churn rates are really low. And then once you establish a control point, you want to expand the offerings through the value chain and sell them more stuff that adds value to their business. And, you of course generate more revenue. So when you're selling to SMBs, like a title company, you're really, a lot of times there's competition, but the competition is like, you have a lot of differentiation, let's say, because in the case of Qualia or Procore or Built, this is the first time a cloud-based solution is really being introduced to that buyer that does everything that they need. In the past, they have purchased usually like an on-premise solution, which they host with a third party, or they host it on a server in their office, and they're doing a lot of manual process with doing a lot of manual process with pen and paper, and just making their business go, but not in an efficient manner. But I would say that on the sales side, or when it comes to influencing these buyers, very different than like an IT buyer or like a marketing buyer or someone who's working for a larger company or even a VC-backed tech company. It's a very emotional sale. Like, it has to be logical and rational. They care about the economics of the business. They care about solving business problems, but it's also the business is their livelihood. So it's how do we influence, how do we solve their business problems, but also how do we connect with them as a human being and prove that we are going to not only make their business better, but we're actually going to make their life better.
That's a really good point, because I think this is something that we talk about quite a bit here at Atrium. Is well, we have a couple of different tenets. Like, one, when you're creating a new category, usually like you really got to like put your arms around the early adopters, because like they're the ones who like get it, and like you use them to then get the next set and the next set. So we call it like what we call lifetime value of the human, LTVH. And so I think it's really important, like, but oftentimes those people are like making a leap, right? And so there's frequently an emotional component to that, where like all the nuts and bolts make sense, like their left brain is like getting it and getting it and getting it, but then like what you need to do is like induce them to understand, like, yeah, you know what, I really do want to be a VP of sales when I grow up. So even though I'm an AE manager right now, I guess I really have to get my act together and learn to manage by metric, or I'm never going to grow up to be Brandon Calley, right? And so like that's obviously a very emotional thing there, and that's oftentimes where like great champion development can happen, is where there's a little bit more of the kind, I call it kind of like forming a conspiracy, where it's just like, hey, you come on over to my side of the table, because like, I'm going to help you get promoted, or like not get fired, or like you're going to get that director of sales role before the other AE managers, and so that's why you're going to be like my bulldog champion here in order to get this across the line. So that happens in the tech, like, because like we sell to these, we sell to like modern sales organizations or early adopters of kind of like advanced technology, but it seems like a similar situation, almost from a risk mitigation standpoint, with respect to the folks that you guys are selling to, where, probably some of these title insurance owners are like, 50 something or what have you, have been like in business for a really long time. And so like they get the dollars and cents, but then maybe, they want to make sure that you're not going to screw up their business as well. Similar, but like, how do you get your reps to like have that tete-a-tete with probably someone who's like maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit further along in their career, who might be like, I don't know, like 26-year-old kid or 28-year-old kid, like you're just trying, like, I can smell the commission breath from here, like, you're not gonna, like, how do you get your reps to really represent appropriately, and give those folks comfort?
Yeah, well, that's a lot of training, I would say, in development, and making sure that we're understanding the persona, but we're also proficient when it comes to knowing the industry and the product. So even though the 50-something buyer who has 20 years experience in title and has been running their own title company for 15 years, they've probably been on the same software for 15 years as well.
Oh my gosh.
That doesn't really meet their needs, and their business is not scaling the way it could be if they're operating more efficiently. And so there's a lot of pain that they're living in. The 26-year-old AE, if we can help them understand that buyer persona, like what is their current state, what is their desired future state, what is the pain that they're living in today, what are some of the positive outcomes that can be experienced if they can change their situation, and get from like the future state to this the current state to this desired future state.
Yeah.
And if we can be thoughtful in our discovery, actually listen to what they're saying, and then be able to know enough about the industry to communicate the value of our solution to them, we can now become a trusted resource when it comes to guiding them through the evaluation process or the buying process. Because even though that 55-year-old title company owner is a seasoned title executive and probably a pretty savvy business person, they don't know much about technology, and they rarely ever make large technology purchasing decisions. But the 26-year-old guides other title companies through the purchasing decision multiple times per month. And so how do we position ourselves as not necessarily title experts, but experts of our respective solution and experts of helping small businesses make intelligent technology purchasing decisions?
Yeah, I was talking. I was on another digital event earlier today, and talking with Matt Cameron from Sassy Sales Management about enabling subject matter expertise in reps. And yeah, like you're never gonna have, the rep is never gonna have more subject matter expertise in title insurance than the person that they're talking to. Like, good luck, right? But they need to have enough. And like enough to like not sound like a goofball, and like enough for them to be able to like create rapport, right? And so how do you, especially like title, and then also like the and also just the like the lending process in real estate is like, it's pretty Byzantine, right? It's like not the most straightforward thing in the world. How do you guys go about like educating your staff so they have like enough subject matter expertise so they don't sound like a goof, like so they don't get laughed off the phone?
No,
you know what I mean?
we can't have that. And that is also like another thing worth mentioning that I maybe didn't mention before, is even though the rep doesn't need to be an expert in title nor an expert in real estate policy, they do need to know enough, because if they don't, the risk is that we've now alienated that prospect. They don't respect us. They don't trust us. They just think we're the guys or gals in the hoodie, and we're never going to be able to get another meeting with them again, or at least for a while. And then in a small finite industry like this is one of the other risks of vertical SaaS, is that reputation spreads like wildfire. And so, so we really doubled down on both ramp training and continued development. During the ramp training, we're immersing people in a week-long course that's only about learning the real estate industry, how title works, what the regulations and rules are, the day in the life of a title processor, which is like the person that's actually working on a file, how do lenders fit into the ecosystem, how do real estate agents fit into the ecosystem, buyers, sellers, other vendors that support the transaction, what is title insurance. And so we're immersing them in the industry, and they get credentialed on that. Then we do the same thing with the product to make sure that they can actually demo the product themselves and don't have to rely on an SE or a sales engineer. And we credential them in that. And then we put them through sales boot camp, because most of our AEs come in with sales experience, but is it the right kind of experience? Maybe, but usually not. And we want to make sure that they're developing their skills in that area. And then we have ongoing curriculum, because things change in the industry a lot, and we need to update them. And then we're also releasing new product on a regular basis, and we can strengthen our value proposition through that. We just need to teach people how to expose pain, how to talk about the new value propositions that might be a part of product launches, and how to leverage the changes in the industry to our advantage.
Yeah. The onboarding boot camp is something that I think everyone is like, it's like pretty standard operating procedure.
Yeah, we've all done it. Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is the notion of like ongoing enablement, and kind of like, so especially like when you're first onboarding, the funny thing is it's like, it's like knowing enough to actually understand the stuff that like you're learning, you know what I mean? It's almost,
Mhm.
and so like we find that with our team is like, we take them through a whole boot camp, personas, product, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's almost like 90 days later, now they're like, oh, I get it. Right. And it's like now you almost like want to run them back through like
Yeah.
part of it again. But like then now they're like selling and it's like, oh man, I can't take them off the field. That'd be like,
Uh, yeah.
crazy.
But you can't, I would like for all the sales leaders out there, I would like, I would say that you should have maybe avoid that pitfall of thinking that you can't take people off the floor to make them better because they could be that
Totally.
much more productive. And that's one of the lessons I learned at MongoDB is like, oh, here's this huge sales organization because I wasn't running all of sales when I was at Mongo. I was just running one of the teams. But overall, globally, Mongo has thousands of salespeople at this point.
Yeah.
And still they follow this like regular cadence of like you do the boot camp up front, but then 90 days in, you actually do something called advanced sales training. And then everyone's required to do the training every year. So you're never getting stale. And I think that's one lesson I learned. And now, I've been head of sales twice since my time at MongoDB. And I've really sort of taken that sort of lesson to heart to make sure that, because you're right, it's like nothing helps you learn like on the job experience. And so
Yeah.
you get this like sort of base, then you go out there and do some stuff in the real world. And now it starts to click. And
Yeah.
then now you have this opportunity as an educator. And so the sales leaders should see themselves as part-time educators. You have this
Yeah.
opportunity as an educator to really like take their knowledge set to the next level, which then informs their execution when they're out there in the field or on the phone selling. And so I would encourage sales leaders to like take the lesson I learned seriously, and don't be
Yeah.
afraid to take people off the phone or out of the field for a week every once in a while to make sure that they're continuing to develop their skills. They know what's going on in your industry. They know what the changes have been in your product, and that way they'll execute better and they'll deliver higher revenue numbers. And if your
Yeah.
sales leaders aren't doing that, then now you need to find a construct within the company to educate yourself and just give your boss a little justification. It's like, hey, if I can spend 2 days doing this stuff internally where I'm not building pipeline, I'm not closing deals, unfortunately, but it's going to allow me to build more pipeline and close more deals down the road.
Yeah. Like it's funny. Like I think about it from the standpoint of like batting cage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or bullpens where the amount of time that you spend, like if you think about any professional athlete, they're doing tons and tons and tons of practice outside of like gameplay, right? And so it's just a question of like making sure that that's blocked out on the calendar as appropriate to make sure that that's actually happening, especially if you can like identify like whatever the particular shortfall is that individual might have. Like, I'm working on my curve, like I'm working on hitting the curve, or I'm working on, waiting back for the ball to come to me, or whatever kind of like fill in the blank is. And I think that oftentimes organization, I mean, because like it's super hard because we're all trying to make the number, beat the number, and usually those plans are like aggressive, right? And so what it oftentimes is like very difficult to like make space on the calendar when you're like, oh man, you could be having another customer meeting, you could be having another, and so I think one of the ways to do that is just to be very intentional and just like blocking out just make time on the calendar on a recurring basis. The way that we do this is we have on Monday evenings at 4:00, we have an enablement hour where we work on a specific thing. And at any given point in time, like a given program might be deployed. It probably like runs for 2 weeks, and then it kind of comes to an end. But at least it's like blocked out on the calendar. And that's like one way that you kind of like force your future self into like actually doing that.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
You need to set aside time and be disciplined about it, and don't skip that time.
Yeah. Don't skip leg day.
Don't skip it.
Yeah, don't skip it. Exactly. Well, so one thing you had kind of mentioned before about like the vertical SaaS playbook was this notion of like establishing a control point that's going to make it hard for an
Mhm.
organization to walk on your solution, and kind of like proliferating up through like the rest of the value chain. I think in you guys' case, what the core offering is that like that title
Yeah.
like management solution, but now you guys have like a lender thing
Mhm.
as well, which I would imagine is like kind of like we got the title thing here, and like the lender's only going to provide like they're only going to release the money once the title is clear, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But that means that now there's like multiple buyers, right? Like we're talking to Larry, the title guy, or Lisa, the title gal, who's been running this. But now we
Usually
have to
Debbie,
talk
usually Debbie or Karen. Yeah, Debbie or
good old Debbie and Karen. So we're talking to Debbie, but now we're talking something different to the finance people, or like the lender folks. And that can be hard when if you're expecting your reps to be able to like contend with like multiple like it's hard enough dealing with multiple personas within a given like buyer type, right? It's
Yeah.
like in our case, like we talk to sales managers and sales leaders and sales operations people, SDR
Mhm.
managers and SDR. Like it's hard enough
Yeah.
kind of keeping those five people in your head. Now imagine that you had to go and like also talk to, I don't know, janitors or
Yeah.
something, right? Like it's totally orthogonal.
Right.
How do you guys contend with that at Qualia?
Well, they've gone the route of specialization. So we have a separate title and escrow sales team and a
Yep.
separate lender sales team. And then I'll talk about, I'll expound on this a little further too. But first, like with title, like we talked about, this is vertical SaaS play. You're selling to an SMB for the most part. A lot of times you're just going directly to the owner of that business
Yep.
or the CEO of that business. And
Yep.
you're able to cover the majority of the sales motion just with that one contact, maybe like a couple of other influencers,
Yep.
for the most part with title. Now, if you
Yep.
shift over to lender,
Oh
and
wow.
that SMB title buyer, they don't understand technology.
Yep.
They're savvy business people, but they don't get technology. They're really laggards and
It's
working
not their
on
thing.
antiquated systems. With
Yep.
lender, a little bit different. These are legitimate businesses
Mhm.
with a lot of cash on hand. Some of them
Mhm.
are Fortune 500 companies,
Mhm.
and you're selling to one division within that company to solve either a pointed problem or a myriad of problems. And so they actually have, I talked about this earlier, like title companies have no process for purchasing technology. Lenders
Yeah.
actually have like deep
They
process,
procurement processes. Yeah.
defined procurement processes for purchasing technology. And so you're
Yeah.
working to, like Pete alluded to earlier in the call, you're working to identify a champion, strengthen
Yep.
the relationship with that champion, make sure that they're going to, sell when you're not around. And then you're going through the sales process of discovery and pain exposure and, value demonstration. And once you are close to a decision point, then they've got to work through this diligence process
Right.
for banks, which is a requirement for financial institutions in this country. That
Oh
takes a
man.
long time, man. It can take anywhere from like 2 to 4 months, and that's after they've already agreed to buy. And so it's understanding those differences
Wow.
that are critical in the buyer personas that are really critical for success. Is like understanding what the timeline looks like, because you're
Yep.
then creating urgency in a different way. With a title company, when you're talking to the owner, you can create urgency around at challenging them, like if their current operational process and technology cause them to lose one deal, like what would that do to their business? And that really freaks them out and could push them to make a purchasing decision, like
Right.
legitimately, right? It
Yeah.
sounds sort of trivial, but it's not. Like we've had many
Yeah,
title
because
companies.
there's small organizations. It's like, one or two deals is a big deal to them. Whereas like the lender, it's like, yeah, we lose deals all the time.
Yeah, exactly right. In the lender, it's looking more at the macro.
Yep.
They're still exposing pain, but you're dealing with a buyer that's far less emotional. It's more about creating business justification that our solution can solve some of their problems, and then like helping them in all costs once they've decided to make the purchasing decision, get through this diligence process. And so it's clearly understanding the differences is critical. And the sale is so different, Pete, that we've
Oh
chosen
yeah.
to specialize. But if you get back over here to title, there are a bunch of different buyer personas, and this SMB title companies, you're dealing directly with the owner. With the really large title companies, there's 250 or so of them in the US. That is much more like an enterprise sale where you are building champions. They've probably made some bigger technology purchases in their past, but there's still a lot of emotion because at one point their title company was really small and it grew to the behemoth that it is today. And but it's really about understanding the different personas that influence the decision, down from the CEO to whoever's in charge of operations, the title processors, to the folks in charge of accounting, folks that are in IT. Because once someone comes onto our solution, and I don't know if it's like this for any of yours who are on the call, every employee of the company becomes a user of Qualia at the title company.
Oh, wow.
So it's really intense change management process.
It's a big deal. What I imagine the average selling prices for the lenders is like, must be pretty substantial compared to, I mean, unless the pricing is like dramatically lower on a unit basis than on the title side. Like the title side, it sounds like it's pretty quick, like, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 20 or 30K or what have you. But on the lender side, it sounds like this is like really long process. Like what are the rough ASPs on the lender side, and how long are those deal cycles?
Yeah, well, on the lender side, the product's less mature. And so the ASP really is just around like 40K, but it's that diligence process that they're required to go through that slows things down. So the actual sales process is probably like a little over 30 days, but then many times the deal's stuck in a stage. Thankfully, we have a stage to track this to see how long it takes, that where they're in diligence for 2 or 3 or 4 months in some cases.
Oh, okay.
On the title side with SMB, our sales cycle is just over 30 days as well. So you can move through those really quickly, even though it's the biggest decision they'll make for the business in the next 10 years. But there's so much pain that, I think once we can show that there's a way out, there's a lot of urgency for them to make a change. With the large enterprise title companies, the sales cycle is much longer. That can be like six to 9 months.
Okay, well, so the good news then is that, so I was erroneously assuming that the finance side was like, a much larger deal as befitting the longer sales cycle. In this case, it's like, no, it's just like a longer sales cycle. It just, we don't get, a much bigger deal, unfortunately.
It's just for them to remain compliant, which really sucks. So what we need to do as a company is build more lender products so that we can have a higher average contract value.
Right, exactly. And
because we're going to go through the same process in many ways, but just command higher ARR.
Yeah, is exactly. Like if you're gonna, is the juice worth the squeeze sort of situation. But I guess the good news there is because like initially I was thinking that it would be like a very, very different like profile of rep. And it sounds like the sales motion isn't dramatically, aside from like the different humans that you're talking to and the different subject matter expertise, the different the sales motion isn't like dramatically different, or at least from a complexity standpoint. So do you end up having like reps, like is there like a clear progression path? Do you have like reps go back and forth, or is it like do they start in like title land and then like you seek like the idea is to go into lending land? I mean, I know that on the flip side, I guess the lending offering is more recent. But yeah, how does that work from a staffing standpoint? What's your staffing strategy with respect to those two products?
Yeah, that's a great question. With title, it's more mature, and we've seen lots of upward mobility through the title sales vertical. The ideal use case for us is someone starts as an SDR, moves into the corporate AE role, thrives there a couple of years, moves into an enterprise AE role, if they're not going to move into a leadership role. And so we've had that happen a bunch of times at this point. On the lender side, it's early innings. We've transferred some people over from our title side to lender and vice versa. And we're still creating the farm system, just to get back to all our baseball talk. We're still creating the minor leagues. So we're building out the SDR team, and we're still creating like the, AAA, which was our corporate sales team. And then we just have one enterprise rep right now, but eventually we'd like to have that same career path for people. Yep, exactly right. And I think there is opportunity for like cross-pollination, because like just like you, we're probably trying to hire the same kind of salespeople you are. We're not worried
Yeah.
about do they have industry experience. It's like, give me someone who is extraordinarily intelligent and has the aptitude to learn new things, someone who has like this sort of unextinguishable fire inside of them to make things happen. And are they a team player that can take feedback, be coachable, generally wants to help others around them? Like if someone has those three things and comes in with a little bit of sales experience, so we don't have to teach them like straight from scratch, or if they're coming in as an SDR, it's fine. If they're right out of school, we just hired
exactly
2 people yesterday that are right out of university. Like
nice.
That's who we're hiring for. We're not hiring some industry expert.
Yeah.
And that's never been the case throughout my career. We've always focused on like identifying talent that's on the upswing of their career and over rotating to just hiring smart people who have the capacity to be superstars, rather than find someone who has connections in the industry and maybe has a lower ceiling.
Yeah, I think I'm more of a fan of like the Qualia like approach that you're talking about. I think it kind of is contingent on like the physics of the market. And what I mean by that is like, look, if the target TAM, if your ICP is like very identifiable, like if we can identify them and we can get to them, then like, all right, great. Like I can take bronze and turn it, like bronze talent, and turn it into silver and then turn it into gold, right? Whereas if like the targets in question are not identifiable, like they're not in Zoom info, they're not in these contact areas, they're not in like LinkedIn sales nav or what have you, and instead we're relying on relationships, A, or B, it's like a very like complicated or kind of like abstract subject matter expertise, where it's like doing a week of onboarding or a couple couple weeks of like boot camp is like not gonna it's not gonna be enough. And so like use Mongo as an example there, right? Like like it's probably pretty tough to get a CTO or VPE to talk turkey with like a 28-year-old, like 26-year-old or 28-year-old AE. I mean, unless maybe they've already come inbound and they've like messed around with like the open source or like the cloud offering or whatever. But like in that case, they've kind of sold themselves a little bit. So that's a different situation. But like, the ability to like develop your own talent and like can be a very powerful thing. I know that you do a lot of baseball coaching. I wonder what are the sort of parallels that you see in coaching and kind of sales leadership there. I think like coachable staff is obviously a good example, but what are the other kind of like examples there?
Yeah, so Austin, I live in Austin. I think I mentioned that earlier in the call. It's very like youth sports in general are very competitive here, particularly football. Friday night lights. But
I thought that was West Texas.
Football, it's all over Texas. The attendance at like your average high school football game is like astounding. It's like, I don't know. I grew up in Michigan. You'd have to take like 1,000 Michigan high schools on a Friday night, add up the attendance, and that still wouldn't like equal one high school football game here in Texas.
Love it.
And then baseball is also really competitive. So with these teams, you're really trying to identify talent, same in sales, right? You're then looking to develop skills. And I think in baseball and in sales, like the things that I've found, the one thing that I found to be most effective is just like an insane amount of repetition on core mechanics, right? And so with baseball, that could be swing mechanics, could have something to do with pitching, fielding. In sales, that's things like how do I do deep and courageous discovery to expose pain?
I love that phrase.
Business.
Courageous discovery. That's a fantastic phrase. It's like no, we're not reading through a checklist here. Like, we're really pushing people and asking provocative questions that are going to like make them uncomfortable, and like maybe
Correct.
make you uncomfortable, that you're making them uncomfortable, because that's when like the real shit comes out.
That's right. If I had a nickel for every time I felt uncomfortable when doing discovery, I'd be like a very rich person.
Right.
Maybe I'm rich already. I don't know. I wanted to.
Yeah.
But both. And so so that's one piece of it. Like other skills where you just need a massive amount. So you have to practice. So you practice by you learn the theory in the classroom. You know, we're teaching people that, but then you're practicing with your peers, right? In batting cages, like Pete said, like we do batting cages multiple times per week here. But then you're also in the game repeating and practicing those things out with prospects. And then if we're looking at things like, you know, the preparation and value demonstration, the AEs on the mid-market team or the corporate team, they're doing all their own demos. And so how do we take what we learned in discovery, map it to the demo, and how do I get really good at influencing people through the demo? Sure, we give them a script and a million video recordings to watch, but until you do it yourself, just like baseball, you can watch a really good hitter broken down into frames and see how their swing works. But you can't do that until you've done that swing 10,000 times, just like it.
Yeah. And I think I mean, I think one of the things that also like people will have a a tendency to blanch at is like decompose. Like, I totally hear you on the repetition thing, but then it's almost like repetition of like very small parts of the sales motion.
Yes.
Because what happens, yeah, exactly. Because what people will do is they're like, oh, I just need to run some more ops. It's like, no. You just need to ask this closing question 50 times in the mirror until the muscle memory is grooved in your brain, and you're never going to be afraid to ask that question. And then we're going to move on to a different one, and then we're going to move on to a different one, or just doing gosh, I remember this from an onboarding standpoint. It was so funny. We had a rep that was like kind of slow in onboarding. You totally see it in his metrics. He did not make it. But what was funny was, aside from the metrics thing, is one of the things that I'm a big fan of repetition. And so it's like, here's the script to the demo, right? Here is some recordings of that demo. And then moreover, now you're going to do it 10 times, but you're going to record yourself doing it, because I need you to prove it to me that it actually happened. Where it's like, yeah, I did it 10 times. Like, no, I need you to record it 10 times, right? And then and so this one rep was like, taking a bunch of time. I hadn't done it. I'm like, dude, what's going on here? Let's go. And then so he finally got to it. And I think it was so funny. Like, he got to like the 7th and the 8th and the 9th, and then he like pinged me and he was like, man, you really were right. Like, it got a lot easier at the end. And I was like, weird,
right?
super weird. And we have like a core demo. We call it a quick demo. That just like demonstrates like core functionality, because like the way that we sell Atrium is like we do it on customers' data. Like they turn on an Atrium account, takes like 5 minutes, and then there's and then the big demo, of course, is like tied to their discovery panes and what have you. But then you have to do like the cursory ones, like, okay, here's the 5-minute intro. And so just being able to like do that 5-minute intro really quickly, like falling out of bed is like a really important thing. And it was just so funny to be like, yeah, it was just like, it just got so much easier near the like 8th, 9th, and 10th time that I did it. I was like, who would have ever thought, right? Who would have ever thought
the repetition and practice would actually like help you improve your execution? It's the same thing with baseball. And it's interesting you mentioned that. I love that example. Is, like some people aren't big fans of scripts. I'm not a fan of it, but they are very effective. And so
you start with it.
I think with our cold call, right, it's like we have a framework, which is really a script, and it has like a decision tree. You can go down different paths based on what the response is from the prospect. But there are certain questions that are just table stakes. And it's exactly that. It's asking those tough questions that if you're not used to asking it, you're kind of sheepish and not confident. And the prospect intuits that, feels it,
Yeah,
or
you
even
got it.
noticeably observes it, and it doesn't go over well. And so you have to
Yep.
like repeat that over and over and over again until you're confident enough to ask this like difficult question or uncomfortable question.
Yeah. It's like one of my favorite phrases on this front is amateurs practice until they get it right, and pros practice until they can't get it wrong.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Great
Right.
quote. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, like yeah, I think the other thing too is like focusing in on things that are like it's fun. Fastball in the batting cage. It's fun. Super fun, right? Just like, right here.
Right.
Or do you have a problem with that in the game?
Right.
No, not at all. What are you doing, man? Like
Yeah.
you strike out on sliders. Get out of here, right?
Right.
Oh, so like practicing on the thing that is uncomfortable is like the most important thing to do. And so like, but so frequently people will blanch from that, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna listen, or like there's a couple of different things that kind of drive me nuts when it comes to like enablement stuff. It's like, one, listening to calls it's not practice. Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah.
it's like listen to it and then repeat it, and then moreover listen to it and then like repeat it like 5 times or like 10 times or
Yeah.
whatever. And the other thing is like practice on the thing that is like your biggest shortfall.
Right.
And then what that means is, and this is why I like the batting cage analogy, is like a sales process is like a whole involved thing, right? And so, where you might have a hitch in your sales motion might be in like right here in the middle, where it's like, okay, cool, we've got someone championed up. Now we got to get access to the economic buyer. How are we going to do that? What are the different ways that we can ask for that? How can we like maybe put the person in a box such that they can, okay, what if they come back and say like, yeah, I'll take that to that person? How do you like handle that objection? Be like, no, I need to come along with, or this isn't real. Like that could be a very, very specific like curveball. And it's like, hey, we got to practice this like crazy, because I see that your conversion rate out of like pilot is way lower than everybody else. So that tells me that you're not able to get like access to power in order to transact. So we need to practice here. And people like they oftentimes blanch at like isolating in on the thing. Like historically, isolating in has been hard to do because like the whole thing has been opaque. Now we have analytics and metrics. Exactly, that allows us to say like, hey, here's your problem right here. But then even just knowing that that's your problem, now you gotta like be honest about it and try to fix it. So it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. And you're not going to be like the listening to the calls analogy. You're not going to fix it by like watching the game, right? You can't like watch a Giants game and get better at baseball, or watch an Astros game and get better at baseball. You actually have to practice. And when it comes to practice, like you were saying, you can't practice the whole game in one sitting, right? Or you could,
no,
but it wouldn't be very practical. You'd have to find a lot of other people to do it.
You'd go through like the 95% of stuff that you don't need practice on.
Yeah, you find that one thing, right? It's like, I can't hit the curve. And in this case, like, like if we put it into Qualia's world, it's like, yeah, everyone is so impressed by my demos, and they say they're going to buy Qualia at some point eventually because they know Qualia is the future, but not right now. And we're getting to that point on 80% of our deals. Like, what needs to change in that? And at that moment in the sales motion, practice like an effective way to get past that hurdle over and over and over and over again, and you'll be able to get past it and hit the curveball. Yeah.
I mean, that's like true kind of like, sales management, sales coaching. That's so right now, you guys, I know that like the real estate market is having some kind of wobbles right now, and so that's probably like impacting you guys' sales motion and kind of your teams. What are what are you guys doing in order to kind of contend with that from a people standpoint, from an organization standpoint, et cetera?
Good question. Yeah. Tech, our economy is, we're dealing with some serious macroeconomic headwinds. Tech is getting blasted.
Yeah.
Real estate is getting blasted even harder. So there are just less people purchasing homes. There are less people refinancing homes, which means our customers aren't as busy and don't have as much cash on hand. Like that's the reality of it. Furthermore, like some of our revenue comes from the number of real estate transactions that are processed on our platform. So our revenue numbers are affected by that as well. And so, you know, when we're faced with these headwinds, you know, we've got to learn some new skills as a sales organization. You know, when you're well funded and you're worried a lot about top line growth, it's all about closing deals. How can I spend more money on marketing to close deals?
Yep.
How can I scale the sales organization, hire more SDRs and more AEs and close deals? You're doing all that stuff while you're attempting to optimize this process and execute better as a team. But once you're facing these headwinds, now it's like, oh, okay, we don't have an endless amount of money in the bank. So we now have to operate with a bit more rigor. We have to reduce costs. We can't necessarily hire people. We actually have to, maybe in Qualia's case, you know, we actually had to downsize a bit and operate with a smaller team than we've been used to operating with historically. So in this economy, you have to invest in your people even more because the production from that person, it matters so much more. There are less people, which means in theory and in practice, like that person has more responsibility and means more to the company and to the company's results. And so we're investing in our people. We're focusing a little bit more on individual productivity. Not that we didn't do that before. You know, Atrium has a great product, by the way, if you're looking to look at individual productivity of reps and analyze that data. But it's like hitting the call metrics, hitting the effort metrics, executing and hitting quality metrics and pipeline metrics now become more important than ever. And so how do we as a leadership team coach up the team to be able to execute at a high level and be more productive? And how do we create an environment where the peers are challenging like one another to do that? And then analyze the heck out of the data so that we are certain we're focusing on the right things. Because I think when you're so focused on top line growth, you can put a lot of irons in the fire and be focusing on pipeline here and there and pipeline here and there and there and calling on all these different personas to multi-thread the account. But it turns out some of them don't work that well. So like where are we going to get the most bang for our buck? Let's point our people there. Let's equip them with all the resources they need to be successful. And let's give them the coaching and support and love that they need from us to be successful.
Yeah, I think we're seeing this in it's funny, we've changed our discovery questions a little bit. Because like with the sales metrics and sales math, like you can measure like, you know, lots of things, right? And like AE prospecting is probably a good example. Like if you have, you know, as many SDRs as you want, or like a bunch of inbound or whatever, because you're like spending a ton of money on Google or LinkedIn or whatever, like maybe your AEs don't have to prospect that much.
Right.
But when that goes away, now like maybe we need to like make sure that our AEs are prospecting, and you got to measure that. Or similarly, like, hey, if we're really focused, like it's not okay. Maybe previously we were like, yeah, you can close, like if an AE closes like 1 or 2 deals a month, like that's great. All right, fine. Like it's accretive. Now it's like, no. Like you've got to close like 4 or 5 in order to like, you know, triple or quadruple your salary expense, or like it's not going to be like worth it. And then another one is like, you know, pipeline hygiene and pipeline management, where if like ops are not like easy peasy to come by, well, I'm sorry, like if like every op in your pipe doesn't have a next meeting on the calendar, like what's going on here? Right. And so like that level of scrutiny, historically, like looking at win rates on a per rep basis in order to say like, hey, maybe who, you know, who's not going to make it, or like, and then, you know, really tightly monitoring pipeline hygiene and pipeline management, because like, hey, I'm not going to give you more opportunities if you're just going to leave them there not being touched. All that sort of like that level of scrutiny is now much higher than it had been historically. And we're seeing that across our customers.
The level of scrutiny is higher, and guess what? You know, because of the improved discipline, the rep closes more deals and makes more money.
Yeah, wouldn't isn't that crazy? Awesome, awesome. Well, Brandon, this is super great. I gotta run to pre-call
Okay,
planning for another for a customer call here in 2 seconds. But
nice.
thank you very much for taking the call, taking the time to hang out. Next week we've got Stephen Brody on. He's the head of sales for Matic. Previously, he was the VP of sales at Bevy, and then also Typeform. He's
Nice.
absolutely fantastic. So Brandon, you have a awesome rest of
Thanks,
your week,
Pete.
and
You
have
too.
a great tournament this weekend. Okay.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. Much
Yeah.
appreciated.